The rumble of motorcycles filled the air, drowning out the chatter of people at a roadside diner. A group of bikers, dressed in leather jackets and heavy boots, stood near their bikes, laughing loudly. Their attention was locked onto a man sitting, alone at a nearby bench, an older black man with tired eyes and a quiet presence. His clothes weren't flashy, his posture was calm, and he didn't seem like the kind of person to pick a fight. But that didn't stop the bikers from throwing smirks and whispers his way. One of them, a tall man with a thick beard, stepped forward. "Hey, old man," he called out, his voice laced with amusement. "You lost or something?" The others chuckled, nudging each other, waiting for a reaction. But the man didn't flinch. He simply glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Just waiting," he said. His voice was steady, calm, like he knew something they didn't. The bikers exchanged looks, their amusement growing. "Waiting for what?" another one asked, arms crossed. The man let out a slow breath, then pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, put it to his ear, and said only 3 words. "It's time now." Silence fell over the group. Something shifted. In the air. The bikers might have been laughing before, but now, they weren't so sure what they were dealing with. Meanwhile, miles away in a crowded city bus, a young black teen sat with his headphones in, staring out the window. He had just finished a long day at school, his backpack heavy with books. The bus was packed, standing passengers gripping onto rails, shifting with every stop. At the next stop, a woman stepped in. She was pregnant, her hands resting gently on her belly, scanning the bus for a place to sit. But there were no empty seats. The teen glanced up, noticing her discomfort. Without hesitation, he pulled out his earbuds and stood up. "Here, ma'am. You can sit," he said, offering her his seat. She smiled gratefully, easing down into the seat with a small sigh of relief. "Thank you, young man," she said softly. The boy nodded and moved to stand near the doors, gripping the overhead rail. It was a simple moment, a small act of kindness. But what he didn't know was that this single gesture would change his life forever. A few moments later, as the bus rolled along, the woman reached into her bag, pulled out a small folded note, and quietly handed it to him before stepping off at her stop. The teen frowned, unfolding the paper. His eyes scanned the words, and suddenly his heart started pounding. His breath caught in his throat. What he read on that note wasn't just a thank you. It was something much, much bigger. And in that moment, everything changed. The teen's hands tightened around the note as he read it again, his heart racing. The words were simple, but their meaning hit him like a truck. He swallowed hard, his mind spinning. Who was this woman? And why would she say something like this to him? The bus kept moving, the city lights flashing by. But everything else around him faded into the background. He barely noticed the sound of conversations, the hum of the engine, or the occasional bumps in the road. All he could think about was the note in his hand. It wasn't just a thank you. It wasn't just a few kind words. It was something bigger. At the same time, back at the roadside diner, the bikers were no longer laughing. The older man sat perfectly, still, his phone still in his hand. He didn't say anything else, he didn't need to. The way he carried himself, calm, patient, almost as if he had already won whatever game they thought they were playing, was enough to make the air feel heavier. One of the bikers, the bearded one, shifted his weight. He tried to act like he wasn't fazed, but something about the way this man said, "It's time now," didn't sit right with him. The others must have felt it too, because their laughter had completely died down. One of them, a younger guy with tattoos snaking up his arms, tried to shake it off. "Oh yeah, and what exactly is time for?" he asked, forcing a smirk. The older man didn't answer right away. He simply tucked his phone back into his pocket and looked up at them. His gaze was steady, unreadable. And that silence, that pause, was somehow worse than if he had actually said something. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached down and adjusted his wristwatch. A small, simple movement, but it carried weight. The bearded biker cleared his throat and glanced at his friends. All right, whatever, old man. We don't have time for games, he muttered. He turned away, pretending to be bored. Let's ride out. But just as they moved toward their bikes, the sound of an approaching engine cut through the air. Single motorcycle, its headlights piercing through the evening dim, rolled up to the diner. It wasn't part of their group. The bikers stopped in their tracks. The bearded man frowned, watching as the new rider pulled into the lot. The engine, cutting off smoothly. The figure on the bike wore a helmet with a dark visor, making it impossible to see their face. They sat there for a moment completely still. Then slowly they lifted their hands and removed the helmet. The second they did, something shifted in the biker's expressions. Recognition, uncertainty, a flicker of something that almost looked like fear. The older man, still sitting on the bench, exhaled softly. "Right on time," he murmured. Meanwhile, on the bus, the teen finally looked up from the note, his fingers slightly trembling. He scanned the crowd, hoping to catch another glimpse of the woman who had handed it to him. But she was gone. She had stepped off at the last stop. His mind raced with 1,000 questions. Why him? Did she know something about him that he didn't? He read the note again, as if expecting the words to change, to offer more clues. His heart pounded. He needed to talk to someone. But who? Would anyone even believe him? Just as he was about to tuck the note into his pocket, his phone buzzed in. His backpack. A text message. He pulled it out, his stomach tightening when he saw the sender. It was a number he didn't recognize. The message was short. Don't ignore the note. His breath hitched. He darted his eyes around the bus. Was, someone watching him? Was this a coincidence? It had to be, right? But deep down, he knew it wasn't. Back at the diner, the bearded biker clenched his jaw, shifting uneasily as the new arrival swung their leg over the bike and stepped off. The figure moved with ease, controlled and deliberate. They weren't big or intimidating in size, but something about them demanded attention. Respect. Or maybe it was the fact that, despite the bikers trying to act tough, not a single one of them spoke up. The older man on the bench smiled slightly. It was a knowing smile, the kind that said he had already seen how this would play out. "Still think I'm lost?" he finally said, tilting his head at the bearded biker. The man's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. The new arrival took a step forward, their gaze locked onto the group. And in that moment it became clear. Whoever they weren't here by accident. Just like that, the game had changed, and in two different parts of the world, two different people, one young, one old, were about to step into something far bigger than they had ever imagined.